Welcome back to Death Toll Racing. This is another Cheap Welders That Actually Work, hopefully, edition. This is the Hone Inverter DC welder. This is a stick welder as well as a flux-core arc welder, gasless wire feed welder. I'm noticing something right away, and that's that these leads are quite a bit longer than normal. So you got an additional 2 feet-ish on the titanium welder. So that's whip is 10 foot. The Harbor Freight titanium is 8, and the titanium is the best welder we've tested so far. It came with a real chipping hammer, a real-ish wire brush. It's plastic, so I don't call it a real one until it's wood. The melting plastic on stuff on accident isn't the greatest. This plastic ends and sheet metal construction, just like you would expect. It does have a nice wire feed unit on it, or a nice appearing one. We'll test that theory as we move on. Size comparison, it's smaller than the titanium, more powerful, and it stick welds on top of it. So we'll see, fingers crossed this thing works out. The green ammo can there, well, that's my lie detector. That's going to make sure that this welder is actually putting out the amps that it claims, and make sure that the knobs are not just Fisher-Price steering wheels and they actually do adjustments. So we got it hooked up through there, and then above that we have an amp meter that's going to show how many amps it takes to run this machine to make sure it's actually going to work for you. I've been in a lot of situations where I only have a 15 amp outlet available, and I need to make sure this thing will run, or at least how high I can turn it up to run it on that 15 amp outlet. So we're going to start with 030 flux core, then 035, then we'll move on to our stick welding. All right, so we got it set at 70, which is normally where I'd weld exhaust out with this flux core. We're just doing a typical scenario on exhaust, on steel exhaust. And running it downhill, normally you'd run structural uphill. On exhaust pipe, you're better off going downhill. And it ran it pretty good. It actually seemed a little bit hot, but according to our lie detector there, it was pretty much spot on. So now we're doing 60, and it also was spot on. It ran pretty good. I want to see how low we can go and see if this thing will start getting sputtery. A lot of times when you turn these welders down, they don't like to weld or even start up. And this thing is having no problems with it, even at 50. Doing it here, the gauge, our lie detector, is still showing pretty accurate, but it's showing about 60 amps as we're on 50. And that's a little bit to be expected when you're turning them down real low. It'll either be higher amps to compensate, or it just won't run. Is the problem there, but it's turning out pretty good. I'm going to try 40, which is just silly, but just to see if you are doing some really thin sheet metal, it still starts up no problem, and it's actually running fairly decent. I mean, it's obviously too cold for this scenario, but it actually is running fairly decent that low. And look at that, it's only taken about a little less than 11 amps to run the welder at that low setting, so that's pretty good. So I turned it up now to 100, and I switched out, obviously, the exhaust pipe, because we just blow holes in it, into just a scrap piece of angle iron to run some welds on. So we're at 100 amps with 030 wire. It's running about 13 and a half amps, say, to draw to run this. And that's pretty good. So that's pretty low input amperage for getting 100 amp output. And then look at our lie detector floating right there at 100 amps. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Well, I got it turned up to 120 now with 030 wire. We're pushing the limits now, but it's not about doing it right. It's just about seeing what the thing can do, and it's running it just fine, really. For 030 wire, it's running a pretty hot weld. Taking about 14 amps to run it, and our lie detectors spot on, right around 120 as we ran it. Now we'll turn it up to 140, and this is really pushing it. I mean, this is out of spec for this 030 wire, but it is what it is. It's taken a little less than 15 amps to run it, fully maxed out. And you know what? It's actually running it pretty darn good. And this is putting out probably about 135 amps. This is small diameter wire, so it's melting a little easier than it should to get that full 140 amps. But either way, it was a little light. You shouldn't run 030 wire at 140 amps anyway, so I'm not going to count this thing out yet. We're going to swap in some 035 wire, which should be able to run at 140 amps, and then we'll try all the settings with that one there. I do like this wire feed unit, though. You can see it's running slow, and then once it realizes it's not actually welding, it figures, well, you must be feeding the spool in, and it automatically kicks the speed up on it, so which is kind of cool. So anyway, it doesn't have a cold feed button, so this is a pretty good alternative to that. So these welders unfortunately come with a gas nozzle instead of a flux-core shield, and that is actually a Harbor Freight Vulcan shield that I just put on there. Now we're going to turn this thing, stand it back up again, and now we got to tell it we're 035 wire, so we just push this button here, boop, and that moves it over to 035 wire, and that'll get your wire speed settings. All right, here we go. This is 140, so we're doing this one backwards. We'll start high and go down. So it's doing 140. We look at our lie detector, and it looks like closer to 150. And it's taking a little over 15 amps to run this, so this is definitely out on a 15 amp breaker to run it like this. You're definitely going to need a 20. But the good news is it'll easily run on a 20 amp breaker. So it run very smooth for 140 amps. That's actually a pretty good weld, a pretty solid weld, and a very large weld. So now we'll turn it down to 120 and see if that still runs as smooth, and it does. And we are under a 15 amp breaker, but we are pushing it. So if you do this for any amount of time on a 15 amp breaker, assuming this is all that's on it, you'll probably still will trip your breaker at 120 amps on a 15, I'm imagining. Runs that really good though, so I can't be happier with that. That's 1/4 inch thick angle iron that we're welding on right there. Now we're gonna turn it down to 100 and we'll do a pass here. This is about as low as you'd go with this 035 wire doing structural welding. If you're doing thinner stuff, use the 030. That would be a better option. And I'm going to point out again, if I haven't mentioned it already, the only wire I would ever run flux-core is the Lincoln inner shield. I have yet to find another one that is even close to as good as that, and it is an actual structural rated wire as well. All right, now we're moving into stick welding. So we're going to start off with 332 7018. This is 70 amps. So we can look on our lie detector there. We are a little over 50, so around 60 amps. We're taking about 12.6 amps. So under 13 amps to run this. This is way too cold for this material. It's 1/4 inch angle iron, but it works. So bump it up to 90, and this is running a little bit better. But if you look, we're only about probably 80 amps there, so it's a little bit lower than what we have it set at, and it's taking about 13.5 amps to run it this way. So these welds end up looking, okay. So you can see the one on the right is the 70 ampere, and that's the 90 amp. So now we're going to bump it up to 100 and put a pass in. So it's taking about 14 amps, a little over 14 amps to run this. So we're peaking out on a 15 amp breaker. It's just under 100 amps there, showing on our lie detector. So it's pretty close. It's not too far off yet. Now we moved it up to 110. It's floating around 100 on the lie detector, taking about 14.5 amps to run. That is not the worst looking weld in the world. That is 332 7018 rod that we just used. Now we're moving into 1/8 inch rod. So this is at 90 amps, and this is on the bottom end of where we run these rods. And this is very, very cold. And if you look at the amps, looks like we're running around 50. I have it set at 90. And I kind of have a feeling I've been doing all this testing back to back to back to back. So this poor little welder's been getting used to crap. And I think it might be fatiguing, or it really doesn't like 1/8 inch rod very much. So we bump it up to 110. And it runs pretty good at 110, but is it actually running at 110? No, it's running at about 70 amps, and that's about what it feels like. So it's working, but it's just on the cold side, and I'm not really sure what's going on with it and why all of a sudden it's not putting out the amps like it was earlier. Still looks pretty good though, but we wanted 110 amps and we weren't getting that, so that's a little frustrating. Here's some fancy video editing. We can kind of watch both at the same time. It's 140 is what I got it set at. It's running around 80 or 90, and it's about 21 volts. So we're gonna have to figure out what's going on here with the 1/8 inch 7018. I'm not super happy with the way this thing's performing, and we don't have the amps there. So this may be my welding technique, or it may be that the machine's getting hot. I'm not sure yet. So we're gonna have to look into that, and we'll try to diagnose what's going on, or if the welder just isn't capable of doing it. The welds still look great though. It's just not doing. It's just not performing as nicely as I was hoping with this 1/8 inch rod. This is 6013. I turned the welder down to 115. It's running about 65, 70 amps. It's taking about 14 and a half to run it. 6013, you know, it really doesn't care. It's a very, very forgiving rod. If you could only have one rod in your cabinet and you just weren't allowed to have anything else, 6013 probably be the one that most people would pick. So farmers use the crap out of that stuff because you can just weld through just about anything with it, and you know, it does a really good job. The top weld there is the 6013 we just ran. All right, guys. So I was playing with the welder last night, and then I had an epiphany this morning on maintaining our amperage with this 1/8 inch 7018. So here's the thing. I feel like I'm able to get the 140 amps out of it. It had nothing to do with the machine being hot or anything. I just have to really change my welding technique and, in my opinion, extremely bury the 7018 rod to hold the 140 amps, which it does no problem. What I feel like is the problem is that it doesn't have quite enough volts to maintain it. So the arc characteristic is just a little odd. It's very cold feeling to me. So if you could see there, we're about 21 volts while hitting 140 amps. Now, if I lift off, the volts go up and the amps go down and that type of thing. But I thought that maybe I could trim that with that upper right knob on the machine. Even though it specifically states that that doesn't do anything in MMA, I thought, well, it's worth a shot trying, and it didn't work. It doesn't do anything in MMA. So there's what it looks like if you hold 140 amps and really bury the rod. It's a little cold looking, but it does work. All right, well, now we're going to either break it or it's going to do what it's supposed to do, and that's thermal out when the welding machine gets too hot. So what I have set up here is I have a rotator set up, and it's going to rotate a big piece of pipe, and it's just going to continuously weld in wire feed in the flux-core arc welding with the 035 wire at 115 amps until the thing either thermals out, melts, or just burns up altogether. So we're going to monitor it throughout and make sure the thing's not overheating or anything like that. I mean, you know, we're going to monitor it. I'm going to let it blow up if it wants to blow up. But hopefully it will thermal out. There is an orange light to the left of the gauge there on the machine that should come on when it thermals out. It's a temperature gauge. You'll notice that the amperage is higher than what I have it set on our lie detector, and the reason for that is because I have the rotator going as slow as it'll go, and it's still going a little bit too fast, so it's a little bit harder to melt the 035 wire than it should be, so the amps are going to reflect that on our lie detector. So this thing ended up going for about 7 minutes and 1 second, and it thermals out right now. It's off. So that's 7 minutes and 1 second is how long it took. According to the chart, that should have taken about 5 minutes. So it lasted a little longer than the chart, but our ambient temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So that if it were a 100-degree day out, it probably would have been closer to that 5-minute mark. So you can see the output there was 125 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is a little over 50 degrees Celsius. And then I was poking it on the inside there, and it was around 119 on the inside of the welder, which is a little less than 50 degrees Celsius, I think. It turned back on after about a minute. I did a jump cut there. It took about a minute before the welder came back on again. Okay, it's working again. So you can see that last pass, it started getting a little hairy on there. It was losing power, I believe, before it finally shut off. But it was laying pretty good welds. This is a very thick piece of material, so that's why it sounded real cold. All right, guys, so is this a welder that I would recommend? Maybe. I think this is going to be one of my favorite little cheap, inexpensive welders, but that's going to be up to you whether this fits. And so I made a pro and con list of things that I liked about it and things I don't like about it. The pro is longer than the con, though, so that's always a good thing. 120 amp output with less than 15 amps input. That's pretty big to me. Because I've been there where you only have a 15 amp available, or you're using like an inverter in the back of your car. I've done that a couple times as well. And you just don't have all the amperage input that you can put into it. So that could be a big deal to you, or not. Stick welding and flux-core arc welding.
That's a big deal to me. I like being able to do both and having both available, and especially because all the leads come off. So I think that's a huge deal. But if you're only interested in the flux-core arc welding, I still think it's a value. If you only are interested in a little stick welder and don't really care about that, probably not so much. So I don't really think I don't think it's the best stick welder in the world, and I think probably a better one's going to come along. I haven't found a better one yet, but I'm fairly confident a little bit better one is going to come along soon enough. But as far as the flux-core arc welding, I think this thing's fantastic. It's rivaling that titanium Flux 125 from Harbor Freight, and there's a lot of features on the welder as the welder physically that I like a lot better, and it has a little bit more power than that Flux 125 has. Also, this thing is tiny. It's about the size of a 5.56 ammo can. My little lie detector unit we made, it's about the same size. It's actually probably a little bit smaller, to be honest, especially once you have all the leads and stuff off of it. And I am going to modify this thing. I'm going to shorten up the power cord on it because I don't want an extra thing dangling off of it. I'd rather, no matter what, in my situation, I'm running that on an extension cord. So having the plug right at the unit or 4 feet or 5 feet away from it, to me, I'd rather the plug just be on it or be an actual port in the side like I did to my Flux 125, that mod. Handle versus strap. So the straps are stupid. This comes with both. I just throw the strap away and it has a handle. A lot of these welders don't have a handle. They only have a strap. And for a guy who doesn't like the strap, which is me, I think that's stupid. So like my Flux 125, I added a handle to it. To add the handle, I had to add latches, blah, blah, blah. So this one already basically has all those mods done to it. So I think that's a huge plus. The removable leads we just talked about, the price, you can't beat the price. Even if you're only going to use it as the flux-core arc welder, the price is unbeatable. I think the value of this is fantastic. The lead lengths, that 10-foot whip, that's big. For flux-core arc welding, that's a big deal. 8 foot is just a little bit too short. 10 foot is right about the minimum I would like to have. And obviously, if it was 1,000 feet long, it'd be even better. But in reality, 10 foot is great as long as the wire feed unit will run it, and it does. And it runs it flawlessly, even with the 030 wire. So that part of it is a huge, huge plus. The 8-foot MMA and the 8-foot ground is also a plus. Sadly, I think that's about the minimum length for those. Honestly, the MMA whip I think should be 10 foot, and then the ground lead is probably okay at 8 foot. All right, so cons. This is not the greatest welder for 1/8 inch in my personal opinion. Some guys weld that way and like it, and you're gonna like this welder. But if you like welding a little bit with a little bit more voltage, you're probably not going to like it very much, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You're just going to have to live with it. That's my complaint with the stick welding. With 6013, honestly, 6013 is so lenient towards stuff like that it really doesn't matter one way or the other. There's no voltage adjustment for stick, and that would have just fixed what I was just talking about if it had that, but it doesn't. The voltage adjustment for the flux-core arc welding, it's not as effective as it says it's going to be on the knobs. It's a little bit Fisher-Price steering wheel. I was turning it up while we were doing our torture test, and it wasn't making a difference on the voltage very much. It was moving the needle a little bit, but it wasn't moving the needle 2 amps or 2 volts either direction like it was supposed to. So I don't really know. Maybe it's one of those things where you can only adjust that while the welder's not running. And I'm going to try that, and I'll pop it up on the screen whether or not that actually made a difference or not. Guys, that is the problem. You can't adjust that while you're welding. When you have as long as you're not welding, adjust the knob and then you start welding again, the adjustment is made. So that was the problem. It seems weird. I don't understand why that would be, but it is what it is. Just something in the circuitry of the board. And that pretty much sums it up. So now it's up to you whether or not that's worth it. I put a link in the description below for this welder from Amazon. I am an Amazon associate, so I will make commission on it if you buy it. I'm not pushing you to buy it though. And if you only need a wire feed, a flux-core arc welder, I have a ton of experience with that titanium 125. I think this welder is going to surpass it in how much I like it. However, I don't have as much time on this as I do on that titanium 125, and I think that is a fantastic welder for the money. That one's usually, I think they go on sale for around $150 for that one. This one's less, and it's more powerful, and it's physically smaller, and it has the handle, and it has removable lips. Anyway, you can see why I'm leaning towards this one, taking over my favorite spot for my favorite compact, inexpensive welder. So I hope that helps you guys make a decision. If not, then I apologize. Let me know down below what I could have done different on this episode. I'm going to clean up right here. I'm going to start doing a exhaust welding tutorial video using this little FC140 to do it.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video was helpful for you. Stay tuned for the next episode out, which is going to be the exhaust welding tutorial. I'm going to show all sorts of welding techniques for exhaust. I'm really excited about doing it, and it's been recommended quite a few times, and I've teased that I'm going to do it a few times, and this time I'm going to follow through with it. So stay tuned for that one, and I hope to see you there.